Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the report with me, Yasmin Khatoon. As the threat of the Islamic State took Britain's terror alert to severe last week, today the Australian Prime Minister announced that the terror threat has also been raised there. I've been following developments.
This morning, Australia raised its terror threat level to high, stating an increased likelihood of an attack at home, despite stressing it had no knowledge of a specific attack plan. This came after alarm bells rang earlier this week when two men were arrested for helping Australian citizens fight alongside fighters in Syria. This is the first time Australia has issued a high alert, although the prospect of lifting the threat level was flagged on Tuesday. Australia has repeatedly raised the alarm about the number of its citizens believed to be fighting with Islamic groups in the Middle East, saying the number of Australians returning from fighting with Islamic State and other groups posed a growing risk. Speaking at a news conference in Melbourne, Australia, Prime Minister Tony Abbott raised the public alert.
Last night, the Director General of Security, ASIO head David Irvine, raised the terror threat to high. Consequently, today, the government is raising the public alert level to high. I want to stress that this does not mean that a terror attack is imminent. We have no specific intelligence of particular plots. What we do have is intelligence that there are people with the intent and the capability to mount attacks.
Australia had been at a medium alert level since a 4-tier system was introduced in 2003. A high alert level is used when officials believe an attack is likely, while a severe level threat means they believe an attack is imminent or has occurred. Security agencies in Australia are aware of at least 20 people who have returned to Australia after fighting in the Middle East. They say the individuals who are allegedly former fighters pose a national security risk. According to Australian officials, up to 160 people in the 23 million rich nation have either been involved in fighting or actively support it. As countries tackle fighters from their own nations joining Islamic State, the United Nations Security Council has said in plans it demands nations to consider it a serious criminal offence under domestic laws in order to prevent and suppress recruitment. Last month, Australia unveiled counter-terrorism measures aimed at preventing young people from going to fight in overseas conflicts. And earlier this week, they announced almost £20 million in new border protection measures intended to blunt terrorist threats.
Now joining me to provide some commentary on the issue is Dr. Ravim Ismail, a terrorism and war analyst for reinsurance industry. Welcome, Dr. Ismail. Can I ask you first and foremost, what exactly do these terror threats mean? We saw Britain go to severe and now Australia high.
Obviously the government can't give away classified information because there's special operations that are in progress at the moment. It is a general way of telling the public that the government is on the case, just like hearing on the tube that the central and northern lines are running just fine at the moment.
Okay, well, Prime Minister Abbott did say that there isn't an imminent threat, but the threat is now high. What's the difference between it being medium and now high?
So one of the best metrics for gauging the temperature for domestic terrorism is the number of failed plots and the amount of intelligence coming in. Now, provided that intelligence is good and provided that the number of plots being interdicted is high or higher than before, then despite the fact that the public may see no further terrorism, the government and the security services do know that the threat is higher than it has been.
Now, the United Nations Security Council have said they want nations to put together domestic laws to make sure these sorts of offences are dealt with more seriously. Are there not serious enough laws in place?
So some countries do indeed have laws preventing their citizens going and fighting in foreign armies. And where possible, it might be best to actually use the existing laws rather than creating new laws which seem to specifically target the Muslim community, the domestic Muslim community.
What sort of laws might we be looking at? And of course, the United Nations did say they were looking into putting something like this forward. So what sort of timescale as well would we be looking at?
Sorry, just repeat that.
What sort of timescale would we be looking at with the United Nations saying that this is something that they're considering putting forward as something that all of their nations should take forward?
Oh, you mean criminalizing foreign military involvement?
Yes.
So, I mean, these laws can be passed quite quickly when the governments have a will to do so. And unlike domestic homegrown terrorism that's never interacted with any foreign elements except through the internet, when we have our own citizens going to far-off places, we know exactly who they are, and when they come back, the surveillance is much easier. So, it is possible to enact these laws rather quickly because it's possible to show immediately that these people are being caught and being put through the necessary court systems, etc.
Okay, Australia specifically. Now, they've said that up to 160 people may have travelled abroad to Iraq and Syria to fight, and at least 20 people have returned. Is that a significant number? Because it doesn't sound like one.
I mean, so to put, to take a step back, Australia has invested $30 billion in the 10 years following 9/11 in security and counter-terrorism. And that's a lot of money. And when compared to the amount of extra money that, I don't know, road accidents and the common flu have received, there's probably an imbalance there. But then that's because with terrorism, because there's human agency, malicious human agency involved, it actually strikes at the heart and the roots of the first duty of government, which is to protect citizens from malicious intent. So even if the threat is small, the fact that there are Australians involved in this and possibly being able to cause fear and distress at home obviously means that the government has to show a response.
And what has the Australian response been like compared to other Western nations like Britain and France?
Yeah, so I mean, in all of the industrialized and wealthy nations, the organs of state are very well developed, and therefore they have capability for surveillance, they have capability for interdiction. This means that they can't be seen to be doing nothing. So Australia, is a well-developed, wealthy nation, and therefore its response is in fact similar to what we see in the US, the UK, and France.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ismail, for your input. We now turn our attentions elsewhere.